It's a really good evening for us. We are really going to have a treat tonight. We're going to get to speak to Don Brown in person. We're going to talk to him about terrorism and Middle Eastern affairs and all kinds of things. If you're not familiar with Don Brown, he's an acclaimed author, a best-selling author, probably the foremost expert, I would say, in the JAG Corps on SEAL Team 6 and what happened with SEAL Team 6. And he also ran for the congressional seat that Dan Bishop vacated. So we're excited to see my friend and former Navy JAG, which is how I know Don Brown so well, come on and talk to us this evening.
Hey, Don, so you're in a loud place tonight because you're crisscrossing the state campaigning. So we're happy to have you, but we know that you're kind of in a big hotel in the ballroom, right? So welcome.
Thank you, ladies. It's an honor to be with you. As always, we are in downtown Greensboro at the Hyatt, and we thought we had a little better acoustics. I've got like a Little League baseball team or something over on the other side, so we'll do the best we can to manage, but there's life here, and so it could be a lot worse, and I'm grateful to be with both of you tonight.
Well, thank you very much. So, when I asked you about the interview, it was about a week ago, and I said, would you please come on and explain what your policies are to protect the interior of the United States against terrorism? And I texted you back and I said, unfortunately, we may have an incident to talk about. And sure as heck, we do. This is Mint Hill, North Carolina. This happened. Thank God the FBI foiled a would-be ISIS attacker. This is an 18-year-old who lives in Mint Hill. Mint Hill, everyone, is a bedroom community of Charlotte. So it's about within, considered within city limits almost. But this young man, Sturdivant, last name, he appears to have been radicalized. He converted to Islam, according to the FBI. He appeared to be radicalized online, and they nabbed him from talking back and forth with someone he thought was an FBI agent. And long story short, he's been radicalized for over a year now, planned this attack, etc. Very serious here. And we've been sounding the alarm for a while. Dan, we had an interview a while back where we sounded the alarm. So I want to ask you this first question. Now we're finding out Sturdivant was flagged in 2022 as a juvenile in contact with ISIS. Okay, this is a while back. This has been going on a very long time. He slipped through after psychiatric care. Then he plotted a martyrdom attack. Now, how would you overhaul domestic surveillance to track and detain known radical Islamists who are in the system somehow, right, before they actually strike?
You're raising a very, very good question. We start from a broader perspective. Communism and Islam are the two twin heads of evil all throughout the world. We have treated both of them with kid gloves. We've treated Islamic and Sharia philosophy as if it's just something else that you can buy from the lollipop store. And we have to start by going back to educating our people on the dangers of Sharia law. This kid somehow got radicalized. He wasn't touched since 2022. No one is in the school system. The great Winston Churchill called it Mohammedism, and spoke very, very forcefully against it from his time, in Africa and Saudi Arabia and other places coming up. So we've got to isolate folks. The other thing we've got to do, and I've been saying this for quite some time. You've heard me say it. Both of you have, ladies. We've got to go ahead and declare both CAR and the Muslim Brotherhood as terror organizations, so we can start cutting their financing in the United States. The governors of Florida and Texas have done this. President Trump has talked about it. He's doing some exploration. I've been calling for this for many, many years. That needs to happen. And we have to understand, the other thing that concerns me is we're looking at Sharia or Islam being protected under the First Amendment as religion. I've got some philosophical problems with that. Now, why do I have philosophical problems with that? When you look at all the world's religions, the common denominator generally, whether it's, and I'm a Christian, and so therefore I'm a disciple of Jesus Christ, but whether it's religion, whether it's Christianity or Hindu, whatever it may be, the common denominators across the board are peace, love, reconciliation, But when you look at Islam, that is not a common denominator that other religions have. What you have is death by execution, death by forcing, and so this kid from 2022, when they first put him on the radar screen, he should have been taken off the streets at that point. One of the problems we're having, and with this poor Ukrainian girl, Irina was murdered brutally in Charlotte in the light rail, and this animal that killed her, he may or may not be capable of being prosecuted. But if you can't prosecute him, you've got to have psychiatric facilities. You've got to have criminal psychiatric facilities that can hold these people long term. And the commitment to, as Sharia philosophy to me, is a psychiatric issue. You got to get these people off the streets. Once there's a hint that they are radicalized, you got to find out how to get them off the streets. We've got to look directly at the problem, understand what it does, understand that Sharia law treats women like animals. The proponents of Sharia law, Muhammad himself, married a 12-year-old Aisha, was having sex with her. When you look at what's going on around the world, they marry little girls, they promote child pornography, child abuse as a legal means, and we have to really get serious about it. As United States Senator, I will work to try to fix our legal immigration system. The biggest loophole we've got in our legal immigration, it's not just illegal immigration that's caused the problem. Biden and the Democrats opened the borders. They may have let 70,000 Afghans in, and one of these Afghans shot and killed the young lady who was in the West Virginia National Guard. But we have got to end Sharia immigration into the United States of America. We are under no obligation to bring it in. It is an anathema. It is a threat. By the grace of God, the FBI was able to stop this young fellow over in Mint Hill today, and they announced it. But listen, we know that there are sleeper cells all over this country, but we got to start by cutting their money. And you go after the Muslim Brotherhood and CARE first. I wish President Trump would put the pedal to the metal on that and not stop messing around and stop. We had 4 years before. It's time to do it. I was worked very closely with Admiral Ace Lyons, who passed away, Commander-in-Chief of Pacific Fleet, and this is something that has been on the radar. But we got to declare them as terror organizations in order to cut the money to begin with, and we've got to have better education. We've got to be bold about speaking out against this philosophy, and we have to do it without fear. I didn't mean to preach a sermon there, but you got me uncorked, Sloan. So that's the way I feel about it, and that's what we got to do.
It's an emotional issue, Margot.
Well, the other thing that we really have seen is through this whole thing with the FBI thwarting this New Year's Eve jihadi plot is the undercover work, but it also highlights a reinsurgence of ISIS threats toward American youth. What aggressive foreign policies would you back to crush ISIS overseas and stop their influence here?
When you can make a tie to ISIS infiltrating the United States, either through social media or through money or attempting to recruit Americans, as this young man may have been, Sloan used the phrase radicalized, someone was trying to recruit him. When you can make that connection, that is a threat to the national security of the United States. And you use the United States military to blow the hell out of these sorts. That's what you've got to do. You cannot be, that doesn't mean go to war necessarily, but it does mean if you can tie radicalization, and you can't just stop at the borders of the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean anymore, because you get on Twitter or you get on whatever social media site is and you can see radicalization attempts. You've got to hit them where they are, make it hurt, and you've got to move to try to eliminate those sources, even if they're overseas. And you got to do it strategically and tactically. Now, but at the same time, we've got to do a better job of educating our kids. This guy gets radicalized. How does he understand? When you look back at the Nazi Holocaust, Hitler got that idea from the Armenian genocide. The Armenian genocide was the nation of Armenia. The Sultan was killing Christians, 1.2 Christians in Armenia. That's where Hitler got the idea. Why aren't we teaching that in history? We've got to do a better job. The education system's got to do a better job. We've got to do a better job of calling good good and evil evil. And when you have communist philosophies, you look at this clown that just was sworn in as mayor of New York. What a travesty. Not one American flag there, sworn in by Bernie Sanders. But we got to teach our kids that they are coddling up to the epitome of evil. These are murderers. They're child molesters. These are misogynists. They hate women, and we've got to do a better job. Alongside hitting them overseas, we got to do a better job of educating our kids and educating some adults too.
So, there's 3 mosques around Mint Hill, and I'm going to get to the bottom of which of the 3 that it was, because he, converted to Islam. Converts can be very, very zealous. The thing that I always say, and I think we had you on when Dan was on, Dan Barami, but as you see, men convert to Judaism or Christianity, you're going to see a man of good deeds. When you see a man convert to Islam, you're going to see jihad. Jihad is a very, very important seminal piece of Islamic texts. It just is. And when you talk about Sharia law, that is a legal system that is incompatible with our Constitution. So that's the whole legal system. And people do get confused because they say, wow, Islam, that's a religion, right? Well, it's part of it. There's also the political component of it and the legal component of it. And it is the political and legal component of it, right, that oppresses Muslims first, right? So that's why we see a lot of moderate Muslims killed. And so to take Sharia law and to treat it as law, because that's as it's written, is exactly the right thing to do. And another legal system, that's already unconstitutional. So that could probably be done. But we're going to get to the bottom of where the mosques are, because something has to be done about that. So I'm going to skip. Actually, I was going to ask you another question, but I'm going to skip to the one I really want to ask you. Would you advocate for increased NSA collaboration with the FBI, for instance, to conduct warrantless surveillance on foreign MB operatives, which would be CARE, obviously, would be on campus, the AMP and others? Would you be up for calling for more surveillance on these operatives who are contacting U.S. persons and cutting through some of the privacy and speech red tape to prioritize national security?
Well, it's a great question. The answer is yes for those organizations. We have to take we have to take care to make sure that American citizens on the other end of those conversations are having their Fourth Amendment rights protected. But even if, here's the thing about it, here's the balancing act here. If an American's Fourth Amendment rights get violated, the exclusion doctrine, can keep certain evidence out. But if you've got a foreign operative, who is intent upon,
but not a foreign operative. This would be a foreign operative contacting a U.S. citizen.
Right,
that would be it. So the subject would be American, and what would trigger that, for my question, is contact from a known MB group in one of the 19 groups.
Right. No, if it's a foreign terrorist organization, and some groups that should be designated as a foreign terrorist organization, that puts them in a different category. So yes, I'm okay with that, because once they're designated as a foreign terrorist organization, the State Department and federal officials have made a determination they are a direct threat to national security, and many of these are Sharia Islamic based as well. So that designation is the key to it. Once that designation occurs, I'm okay with it. Again, I would rather have that. And if there's an inadvertent Fourth Amendment violation, then the American citizen, can argue for suppression of the evidence. But when you're getting to a thing like the thing that almost had happened in Charlotte over the weekend, who knows what happened? They banned guns in England, but look at what's happened with the murder rate with knives. There could have been an absolute catastrophe.
Car rammings, hammers, knives. And by the way, this is where I'm going to stand on my soapbox and say, this is why we need permitless carry in the state of North Carolina now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Only criminals obey gun laws. And then be clear, we're, as a peripheral topic, the North Carolina system of having to get concealed carry is a direct violation of the Second Amendment. The right of the people to keep and bear arms, and the key phrase is shall not be abridged. But I fully agree with that. But this kid could have carried out a mass attack, even with knives, and killed a lot of people right here in Charlotte. And the problem that we have, when Biden went crazy by letting in, it got you back to 1965 with this Hart Sellers Act. That's when the entire focus of the United States legal immigration system began to change. That's where the block immigration started, that's when the Democrats deliberately opened the door to more immigrants from Sharia-based countries than from Europe. There was an attempt to change, whether they admit it or not, the entire structure of the American Republic. You go back to there, and that's when it kind of started. And we have got to, we've got to be more and more vigilant about understanding the danger of this particular philosophy. And go ahead.
I was just going to say, in understanding that, a mass migration has overwhelmed a lot of local resources in North Carolina and created vulnerabilities exploited by criminals and terrorist networks. We've noticed that even, and I hate to say this, mosques in the Charlotte area have been used to congregate before going to DC to burn flags.
Yep.
I'd really like to know, beyond the borders, what reforms would you demand to close these security gaps in and around the country?
Well, when you're talking about these mosques, and it is a problem. I've talked with local mayors. They try to come into neighborhoods, and it goes back to a comment I made earlier. I think you're.
Oh, he's on mute. You muted yourself.
Mute.
I apologize. Let me back up. These mosques coming into suburban areas, even around Charlotte, they're putting one in Weddington, North Carolina. There are several around Mint Hill. This goes back to a comment I made earlier, Margot. You've got to squeeze their money. That's where you start first. Number one, you got to squeeze their money, and you take out if you put CARE and the Brotherhood on that list. I believe that's going to go back to the Holy Land Foundation trial. That was a terror financing prosecution, and these two organizations were unindicted co-conspirators. So you start there. That will squeeze the money some, but then you've got to understand when we change our philosophy of what Islam is, we have a better opportunity to move from a prosecutorial standpoint against some of these groups, because they have become, many of them become basically incubation cells for growing this type of philosophy. They hide behind First Amendment protection, and when I don't think they're really entitled to First Amendment under the free exercise clause of the United States Constitution, because again, as we pointed out, the object of Islam is jihad, not love and reconciliation, as you would have with the good works portions of Judaism or Christianity. So, but you cut the money first, Margo. You've got to come really, really hard against any of these Islamic organizations. You got to watch them closely. They've already been named as unindicted co-conspirators. The Holy Land Foundation was sending money to Hamas, which is, of course, Hamas came across the border October 7th. And the Holy Land Foundation is sending money to them. Why would you show any tolerance to these groups? I think you've got to try to aggressively shut the money, Margot, and start from there. I think we got to have federal death penalty. When this sort of thing is going on, I think we've got to aggressively enforce it. Let me just give you, but we don't have the guts. Let me just give you a side to this. As you know, you're kind of to point out, Margot, I've been very heavily involved in the military justice system. Worked with Pete Hegseth on some rules of engagement issues. President Trump pardoned one of our clients, and we have one military defendant who is sitting at Leavenworth right now under a death sentence. His name is Nidal Hassan.
Yes.
He's a guy that shot up. The Fort Hood soldiers and killed a dozen or two, injured many more, and he was given a death penalty. Why is he sitting there on the taxpayer dole? You and I are paying for that when he's under a capital sentence already. We got to have more guts to go after this sort of thing. They're afraid to do it. Military's afraid to do it. What's coming down from the administration, you take them out. Then they're afraid of all the repercussions. We can't be afraid. We've got to hit them hard. And I think we ought to go ahead and carry out a death penalty in that case, because it's been assigned. And that needs to happen with these conspiracies coming out of these Islamic mosques and this sort of thing. When you are harboring, some young fellow like this who has now appeared to be radicalized, and if he was, fortunately, he was stupid enough that he couldn't figure out he was talking to apparently an undercover FBI agent when he was laying out his plan. Had he not done that, it'd be an entirely different story we'd be talking about today.
So one more thing I'm going to follow up, and that is, what are your thoughts on ending chain migration and the lottery visas?
End up now. I mean, it should never. Our immigration system should never, ever, 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 ever be built on a lottery system. What do we know about somebody winning the lottery? I mean, listen. First off, our immigration system should be based legally on something that we saw in the beginning of 1952 when we brought in German rocket scientists who had turned against Hitler, built their V2 program. They turned against Hitler. We used them for NASA to help build the Saturn rocket program. So we know they were philosophically aligned because they were opposed to the Nazi regime. They were not taking jobs that Americans already had. So you see the problem. These visa systems, HB1, it was what they do. They give lip service to something, and then it operates totally opposite. It was supposed to bring in people who were filling positions that Americans could not fill. And it's what it's done is turned into employers hiring cheap foreign labor and displacing Americans. It's got to go. Blockchain migration is a dangerous concept to national security. Why should your second cousin once removed and your aunt, whoever she is, be able to come in simply because either you're coming in through a lottery, and then there's a blockchain with everybody and their brother coming in. It's foolish. It's dangerous. It needs to come to an end. It's one of the first things that needs to be repealed and ended in our legal immigration system. As U.S. Senator, I'm going to fight for that. I really believe it, and it's a very good question. It's a very good point.
So, well, the last question that I'm going to ask is this, because we've been talking, all of us have been talking about the foreign doctor bill, which actually took effect a couple of days ago. And so the one way that we can block this from happening, and what it is, guys, if you haven't heard us hollering about it for the last 6 months, North Carolina is now going to hire or is making it legal for employers to hire doctors who are trained in 22 Arab countries, 52 Arab countries, actually, who really cannot be vetted, who, they go to the front of the line for American doctors. But if CMS at the federal level would make a rule, okay, it's probably going to have to be an administrative rule first, would make a rule that Medicaid and Medicare will only pay for a doctor who has been licensed and educated in America. This would end immediately, because now North Carolina is becoming the UK and the UHS by allowing doctors to pour in here who have trained out in the middle of Pakistan and have been delivering babies in a tent 5 years ago, maybe, right? I mean, employers want to hire cheap labor. That's what they're going to do here. Republicans did this. We've been very upset about that. We've been told that it's going to change, but I think we put the kibosh on it because, look, Republicans did this here in North Carolina. We know that Democrats are going to get that idea all over the country now, and we need a federal level fix. What should we do?
Well, I think your suggestion of having CMS issue regulations that would prohibit any of these foreign doctors from being able to get paid or from the entities that are bringing them in. That's really the problem. You have these hospital systems bringing them in because they want cheap doctor labor. And you see some of these Republicans like the idea of the contributions to their campaigns and sort of a quid pro quo, but it's bad for the country. I mean, you and I have talked this before, Sloan. I mean, aside from the fact that you don't know the quality of care that you're getting from some doc that's been out in the Sudan and living in a tent for the last 4 years, hasn't been practicing, aside from the dangerous sub-level quality of care, you've got the philosophical problem of, again, going right after these Islamic nations. And it's one of the most foolish things. I mean, I've got friends in the General Assembly. I don't know what they were thinking on that one. That needs to come to an end. If I were in the Senate, I would certainly push CMS to issue those regulations. And I think, again, this is an issue. This is a federal immigration issue. And the Constitution of the United States gives Congress the power to set rules for. The phrase immigration is used, the phrase naturalization is used. That is the process by which a foreigner becomes an American. So really, it's a federal supremacy question, and it should be shut down at the federal level. So I think you're on the right track here. It's very, very dangerous. And the last thing we need in the rural sections of North Carolina, and as you and I also talked about, Sloan, they're driving a Mack truck through the smallest, crease, and it isn't just the poorest counties. Anyway, they're winding up in Chapel Hill, and they're going to be winding up in Chapel Hill, Wake County, Orange County. They're going to be everywhere, and we need to shut it down before it gets out of control. And it's interesting because, as an aside, it was just last week the U.S. House passed the the bill to stop this child mutilation by gender transforming surgery, which is again, off the charts evil and unfathomable. The Biden administration, the same, prosecuted this doc down in Texas for blowing the whistle on the practice that was going on at Baylor. That's exactly right. But we had 207 Democrats vote to protect that gender mutilation system and 7 Republicans. It's absolutely crazy. But when you start bringing in these Sharia-based doctors, you're going to have more and more and more and more of that. And it's not only that, but you have the whole problem with the child mutilation and having sex with children. They just turn an eye to it. I think it's a disaster. And I appreciate you taking the lead on this, Sloan.
Yes.
I really like your idea of having CMS. That will be a short-term fix, but the Congress needs to step in and fix it too.
Because you said yourself, the best and the quickest and most efficient way is to go after the money. So if you cannot bill, you can't bill for their services, what's the point of bringing them in? And then Americans get those jobs, which is exactly who should be getting those jobs first at the front of the line anyway. I think we can all agree with that.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Going going back to Margot's question earlier, the question about the mosques, you go after the money. If you go after care, and if you go after the Muslim Brotherhood, I think it's gonna cut a lot of money being funneled into these mosques for quote unquote educational purposes. They claim to be educational organizations. Education by what? Yeah, they're educating all right in the Sunnah and the Hadith and the Quran, which are the basis of Sharia law. They're educating all right, but it's not the type of education that we want to see taught in this country.
I think that's a good point. I think it's also important that we go after the money for another reason. They're buying property. We know they are. Where are they getting the money to buy this property? A lot of property, not just little plots. We're talking major acreage. One place in Texas, we know they've literally tried to take over the city of Frisco, which is not small. So I think the money concern that you're talking about is very valid.
Texas has been a big battleground. Of course, we refer to the Holy Land Foundation trial, which came out of Texas. But there have been a number of mosques and Islamic cemeteries, etc., that have been sprinkled all throughout Texas and protected by federal law under a statute called RLUIPA, the Religious Uniformed Persons Protection Act. Why they put the religious and incarcerated persons in the same act, I don't know. But RLUIPA has protected a lot of the Muslim movement within Texas, but the thing is, though, we got to understand we're not going to successfully cut the money train until we have the guts to recognize the problem that we're dealing with. I mean, George W. Bush, golly, when I was on active in the Navy, we had 3 types of chaplains. We had Protestant, we had Catholic, we had Jewish. George W. Bush put the first Islamic chaplain in the Navy, and it went to hell in a handbasket there. Next thing you know, you've got freaking Wiccans building a shrine at the Air Force Academy. That's a Republican president, and his daddy started talking about a new world order. So I don't have a problem calling a Republican until we need to do it. And I am America first, and I am the United States Constitution first. And when we're Constitution first, we got to recognize, as Sloan said a moment ago, that Sharia is at war with the Constitution.
Yes.
I was when I went to I was in Paris in 2016. Maybe I shared the story. If I had, just tell me to shut up. But we've been invited. An American delegation had been invited over by the Nationalist Front Party, headed by Marie Le Pen. Y'all may have heard of her. I'm sure you probably have.
Of course.
Yep. And her dad was the head of that party. They were excited because Trump had been elected, and what they were excited about was border security. And I'll never forget. I went with General Paul Valley. I went with former Congressman Mike Flanagan, and there was another guy who wrote a book on Trump.
Oh, I think he froze. Don has frozen.
Okay. Well, we will end it now, and I will work at that ending.
Okay, you do that. Do you want me to put an ending on it? Thank you, Don, for coming.
Yeah, do that.
Well, Don, we really do appreciate your time. We're happy that you had
him. No, we'll remove him and say we're glad he came on.
Okay.
All right, go.
Well, it was great to have Don on, and I'm glad he came to talk about this really serious issue that not only affects North Carolina, it affects all of America and most of the world.
Yeah, we've been talking about it as if it's a European problem, or sometimes when attacks happen, a New York problem or whatever. It's our problem. We told you it was, and sadly, tragically, we were right. So big thanks to Don. And up next, we're going to have Michelle Morrow. She's another Senate candidate. She just entered in. We're going to ask her the same series of questions on Thursday night. So be sure to tune in.
Have a good evening.
Okay. Girl, my back is killing me.
Get off here.
All right. Bye.
Bye.